My granddaughter Emma dropped her voice to a whisper and shattered my world. "Grandma, I heard Mommy and Daddy say they're putting you in a home today and taking your money." I forced a warm smile and gently patted her little head, even as a storm of rage built inside me. Brian and Jessica had no clue what kind of battle they'd just started. Let me rewind a bit. 18 months ago, my husband Frank passed away suddenly from a heart attack. That's when Brian and Jessica swooped in, all fake concern and crocodile tears. "Mom, you shouldn't live alone anymore," Brian had said. "Move in with us. We'll take care of everything." What they really meant was, "Come babysit for free and bankroll our lives." Emma's innocent words had flipped a switch in me. While she sat quietly coloring at the table, I reached for my phone and dialed my lawyer, David Morrison. He'd been a high school friend and handled Frank's estate. "David, it's Margaret Sullivan. I need to see you today, 2 p.m. if possible." He hesitated. "Is something wrong, Maggie?" "Let's just say the tables are about to turn." My next call was to the bank. "This is Margaret Sullivan, account number 47789. I'd like to discuss a fund transfer." The banker confirmed what I already knew. Frank's life insurance and our savings gave me far more wealth than Brian and Jessica imagined. I hung up and glanced at Emma, blissfully unaware that her little warning had just saved me from being completely stripped of everything. I smiled and ruffled her hair. "How would you like to help Grandma with a very important project?" Her eyes lit up. "What kind of project?" "The kind," I whispered, "that teaches people a lesson about counting chickens before they hatch." By 1:30, I was ready. Purse in hand, stuffed with every critical document I'd started carrying after Frank's death, I told Emma we were going for a walk. My instincts had been screaming this day would come. We headed to the cafe where David was waiting, his face serious. I explained the situation. "They think I'm weak and disposable," I said. "It's time they see the truth." David's jaw tightened. "What do you need done?" "Everything. Rewrite the will, revoke their power of attorney, move every cent into new accounts, and I want it done before they get back from their errands." As Emma happily skipped beside me on the way to David's office, she had no idea she was about to witness the most satisfying takedown in our family's history. While she played with toys in the waiting room, I sat across from David and reflected on my blindness. The red flags had been there all along, but grief clouds your judgment. After Frank's funeral, Brian had gently suggested I sell my home and move in with them. "The housing market's great right now, Mom. You'd get top dollar, and we'd love to have you nearby," he'd said. What he didn't say was that my Social Security would help cover their mortgage, and my unpaid babysitting would save them nearly $800 a month. I sold the house Frank and I had loved for over 3 decades and handed them the $600,000 profit to help with debts. "I should have known," I muttered as David prepared the paperwork. Jessica's sudden warmth after years of treating me like an inconvenience. Her smile when she heard the sale price. The last year and a half had been a masterclass in manipulation. Every time I hinted at getting my own apartment, Brian piled on the guilt. "Mom, Emma needs you. Besides, wouldn't you rather live with family at your age?" At my age, I was 67, not 97. I still drove, cooked, managed finances, and apparently plotted circles around their little scheme. Jessica had been softer, but no less calculated. "Oh, Margaret," she'd said sweetly, "Emma's thriving because of your help." Jessica had been more subtle, but equally calculating. "Oh, Margaret, your experience with children is invaluable. Emma's doing so well in school. It's definitely because you help with homework." Translation: keep doing free childcare while we go out 3 nights a week. What hurt most wasn't even the workload. It was how methodically they'd isolated me. "Oh, you're so busy with Emma," Brian would say. "We didn't think you'd want to rejoin book club." "The church ladies called," Jessica once added. "We told them you weren't feeling well enough for visitors. Bit by bit, they'd cut me off from my support network. But they'd made one fatal mistake. They thought I was weak. David slid a stack of papers across his polished desk. This revokes their power of attorney and makes me your sole representative. This one moves all your accounts to a bank they know nothing about. And this, he gave me a thin smile, is your brand new will. I signed each document with deliberate strokes. What about the house money I gave them? I asked. That's where it gets interesting, he said, eyes glinting. There's no formal loan agreement, so we'll argue it was a gift contingent on you living there permanently. If they break that arrangement, they'll owe you every cent, plus interest. I glanced at my watch, 2:45. They'd be home by 4, expecting to find their meek old mother ready to be carted off to Shady Oaks nursing home. Instead, they'd walk into a house ruled by a woman who'd just taken back every ounce of power they thought they'd stolen. Emma barreled into the office. Grandma, are we done with the boring grown-up stuff? Almost, sweetheart. Just one more stop. That final stop was First National Bank, where I'd banked for over 40 years. Emma sat happily in the children's corner, a lollipop in hand, while I spoke to Janet, the branch manager. Mrs. Sullivan, Janet said cautiously, peering over her glasses, this is highly unusual. You want to transfer everything today? Checking, savings, CDs, all of it to a new account at Commerce Bank? Yes, I said firmly. Her fingers clattered over the keyboard. That's quite a large amount. Are you absolutely certain? I pictured Brian's shifty eyes that morning, how he couldn't meet my gaze. Jessica's lingering hug that had felt more like a goodbye than a greeting. Their sudden insistence that I stay home with Emma instead of joining their errands. I've never been more certain in my life, I replied. The process took an hour. When Janet finished, every penny was safe. $637,412. Frank's life insurance, our retirement funds, the house sale proceeds. 4 decades of careful saving. All money they thought they'd inherit once they had me declared incompetent. Mrs. Sullivan, Janet asked softly, if you don't mind me asking, why the rush? I smiled sweetly. Let's just say some people are about to learn the hard way not to count their chickens before they hatch. By 3:30, Emma and I were back home. I sent her to her room to play while I started dinner. Pot roast with mashed potatoes, their favorite. If this truly was going to be my last meal in their house, I wanted to make it memorable. As I peeled potatoes, I pictured their conversation that morning. The appointment at Shady Oaks is at 5, Brian would have said. We'll break it to her after dinner. By tomorrow, she'll be settled, and we can start the power of attorney paperwork. No doubt they'd already divvied up my money. Jessica had been eyeing a new SUV, Brian talking about remodeling the kitchen. They'd even mentioned a European vacation, something they could finally afford once they had my accounts under their control. At 3:45, their car pulled into the driveway. I smoothed my apron and caught my reflection in the window. I looked every bit the sweet, docile grandmother, preparing a hearty dinner for her beloved family. Perfect. The front door swung open, their voices louder than usual. Cheerful to the point of being unnatural. Guilt will do that. Mom, we're home, Brian called. Something smells incredible. Just making your favorite, I answered, cheerful as ever. Emma's in her room. How were your errands? There was a slight pause before Jessica's voice chimed in. Fine, just running around town. I smirked to myself. In an hour, they'd realize that while they were running around town, plotting to ruin me, I'd been orchestrating the most devastating checkmate of their lives. Dinner was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive theater. I served their plates with extra care, asked about their day with genuine warmth, and even complimented Jessica's new haircut. They squirmed in their seats like guilty children, exchanging nervous glances when they thought I wasn't watching. This roast is amazing, Mom, Brian said, though his fork barely touched his plate. I wanted tonight to be special, I replied with a soft smile. You never know when things might change. Jessica nearly choked on her mashed potatoes. Change? What do you mean? Oh, just life in general, dear. Nothing stays the same forever, does it? The tension hung in the air, thick enough to slice with the carving knife. Emma, blissfully oblivious, filled the silence with stories about school, her cheerful voice cutting through the heavy atmosphere. At 7 o'clock sharp, Brian cleared his throat. Mom, could we talk to you in the living room? Emma, go play in your room for a bit. Here it comes, I thought. The big moment they'd been rehearsing all day. We sat in the living room, Brian and Jessica stiffly perched on the couch, me in my favorite chair by the window. Brian wrung his hands. Jessica stared at the coffee table as if it held all the answers. Finally, Brian spoke. Mom, Jessica and we've been talking, and we think it might be time for you to consider other living arrangements. I tilted my head, feigning confusion. Other arrangements? You mean getting my own apartment? Not exactly, Jessica cut in, her voice honeyed but sharp at the edges. We were thinking more along the lines of assisted living, somewhere with people your age, activities, staff who can help you. You mean a nursing home? I said flatly. It's not a nursing home, Brian said quickly, forcing a smile. It's a beautiful community. We actually visited today, Shady Oaks. It's lovely. Great program, safe environment. You've already made arrangements, haven't you? I asked, watching their uneasy glances. We thought we'd explore options, Brian muttered. I leaned back, letting the silence draw out until their confidence crumbled. They expected tears, begging, maybe a breakdown. Instead, I smiled. Well, I said lightly, that's interesting timing. Jessica stiffened. What do you mean? I said calmly, reaching for my phone. I spent today exploring options. 2. I dialed David's number. David, it's Margaret. Could you come over now? Yes, I think it's time. Brian's face drained of color. Mom, what are you doing? Taking care of business, sweetheart, just like you taught me. I rose, smoothing the skirt of my dress. David Morrison will be here in 10 minutes to explain some changes I made today. You might want to sit down. Jessica gripped Brian's arm. What is she talking about? Right on cue, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find David standing there, briefcase in hand, his expression grim. Good evening, Margaret, Brian, Jessica. David, I said cheerfully, why don't you explain to my son and daughter-in-law what we accomplished today? David sat in the armchair opposite them, flipping open his briefcase like a judge preparing to deliver a verdict. Brian and Jessica looked like a pair of defendants awaiting sentencing. Thankfully, Emma had drifted off to sleep upstairs, sparing her from witnessing what was about to unfold. Where should I start? David asked calmly. The power of attorney seems like a good place, I suggested sweetly. David nodded. As of this afternoon, Brian and Jessica Sullivan no longer have any legal authority over Margaret Sullivan's affairs. The power of attorney you intended to use has been officially revoked. Brian jumped to his feet. Intended to use? We weren't planning anything. Sit down, son, I said, my voice low but firm. We both know that's a lie. Jessica's face was as pale as porcelain. Margaret, I don't understand. Why would you do this? Because 8-year-olds hear more than you think, I said evenly, locking eyes with her. Emma told me everything about your little conversation this morning, about putting me in a home, about taking my money. The silence was crushing. Brian sank back onto the couch, panic written all over his face. Jessica's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping on a dock. David, I continued, would you mind explaining the financial arrangements? Certainly, David said smoothly. Mrs. Sullivan has moved all her funds to brand new accounts at a separate bank. This includes roughly $637,000, her life savings, insurance payouts, and the proceeds from selling her home. You can't do this, Jessica finally stammered, her voice cracking. That money, you gave it to us. Actually, David said evenly, adjusting his glasses. After reviewing everything, there was never a formal loan agreement. That money was given under the understanding that Margaret would live here permanently. If that arrangement is being terminated, she has every right to demand repayment. With interest, I added sharply. Brian dragged his hands through his hair, his composure slipping. Mom, please, let's talk about this rationally. You don't understand what you're doing. Oh, but I do. I rose from my chair, feeling a strength I hadn't felt in years. I understand perfectly. I understand you've been plotting to have me declared incompetent to seize control of my finances. I understand you've been cutting me off from my friends, treating me like unpaid staff. And I understand you've been drooling over money that was never yours. Brian's voice grew louder. We were trying to protect you. You're 67 years old. Living alone isn't safe. I'm not living alone, I snapped. I'm living with people who see me as a burden and a walking checkbook. That's not family. That's a prison. Jessica leaned forward, desperate now. Margaret, please, we went about this all wrong, but we do care about you. I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound that made her flinch. You care about my Social Security payments. You care about free childcare. You care about my money, but you don't care about me. David cleared his throat, breaking the tension. There's one more issue to address. My lips curled into a sharp smile. Ah, yes, the best part. David pulled out another folder, placing it neatly on the coffee table. Margaret has also updated her will. The previous version left her estate to Brian, with provisions for Emma's education. The new version contains significant revisions. Brian's face turned a sickly green. What kind of changes? I looked him square in the eye. The kind where Emma inherits everything, held in trust until she's 25. You and Jessica get nothing, not a single penny. Jessica let out a strangled sound, half gasp, half wail. You can't do this. We have a mortgage, car payments, Emma's future to think about. You should have thought about that before you plotted to rob me blind, I said, my patience gone. You really thought I wouldn't see through your scheme? Shady Oaks costs $4,000 a month. You had it all mapped out, didn't you? Tuck me away, liquidate my belongings, take over my accounts, and live large on the leftovers. Brian tried one last desperate plea. Mom, I'm your son, your only child. Dad would have wanted you to take care of me. That was his fatal mistake, invoking Frank's name. Your father, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, worked 2 jobs for 30 years so we could save every penny. He sacrificed so much so we'd have security. And you were planning to steal it while I'm still alive. I walked over to the mantel and picked up Frank's photo, gazing at his kind, weathered face. You know what your father would say if he could see you now? I said, turning back to them. He'd say, I should have done this sooner. I carefully set the photo back in place and faced them fully. David, there's one more document, isn't there? David gave a grim nod. The eviction notice. Mrs. Sullivan no longer feels safe here. As tenants without a lease, you have 30 days to find alternate housing. Eviction notice? Brian's voice cracked. This is our house. Actually, I said, retrieving another folder from my purse, that's where things get interesting. Remember that $600,000 I gave you? I have all the bank records showing that the transfer came from my account to yours, specifically to pay off your mortgage and other debts. No loan paperwork was signed, but I do have emails where you promised I'd always have a home here. Jessica's face crumpled as realization dawned. You want the money back. Every single penny, plus the 18 months of rent you should have been paying me, the money you saved on babysitting, and of course, compensation for emotional distress. I smiled sweetly. By my math, that comes to about $700,000, all told. Brian's voice was barely audible. We don't have that kind of money." "Then you'd better get creative," I said with a shrug. "Sell the house, cash out your retirement, pick up second jobs, or, declare bankruptcy. Either way, I won't be footing the bill for your lives anymore." David rose smoothly, snapping his briefcase shut. "I'll leave you all to process this news. Margaret, your new apartment is ready whenever you want to move in." As he headed toward the door, Jessica called out, desperation cracking her voice. "What about Emma? You can't just abandon your granddaughter." I paused on the stairs, one hand resting on the polished banister. "I'm not abandoning Emma," I said evenly. "I'm teaching her a very important lesson about what happens when you try to betray the people who love you. Someday, she'll understand." With that, I climbed the stairs to pack my things, leaving Brian and Jessica alone to face the wreckage of their perfect scheme. Tomorrow, my new life would begin. Tonight, I'd finally sleep better than I had in months. Behind me, Jessica's sobs broke the silence. 3 weeks later, I was sipping my morning coffee in my beautiful new apartment, the sunlight pouring through windows overlooking Riverside Park. From my seat, I could see joggers and dog walkers enjoying the crisp morning air. The 2-bedroom furnished unit cost me $1,800 a month, a fraction of what I'd been handing over to Brian and Jessica under the guise of living expenses. My phone rang, Brian's name lighting up the screen for the 14th time that week. I ignored it, as I had the previous 13 calls, and waited for it to go to voicemail. "Mom." His strained voice came through the speaker when I replayed the message. "Please call me back. We need to talk. This has gone too far. Emma's asking where you went, and Jessica's having panic attacks. We can work this out if you'll just be reasonable." Reasonable? I almost laughed. That was a bold word coming from someone who'd plotted to have me committed to a nursing home. I deleted the message without hesitation and dialed David instead. "How's our lawsuit coming?" I asked as I settled back in my armchair. "Slowly," David admitted. "They've hired Martin Burke from Burke and Associates. He's actually a solid attorney. He's arguing that the money you gave them was a gift, not a loan, and that you can't demand repayment after the fact." "And what did you tell him?" "That we have 1.5 years of documented evidence showing they treated you like a tenant, not family," David replied firmly. "We've got bank statements, emails, even grocery receipts where you paid for their household. There's a clear pattern of financial abuse." I allowed myself a smile, feeling vindicated, until David's tone shifted. "There's more," he said carefully. "Burke filed a motion, claiming you're not mentally competent to make financial decisions. They're pushing for a psychological evaluation." The smile vanished from my face. "They're still trying to have me declared incompetent?" "It's a last-ditch move. They know they're losing, so they're throwing everything at the wall, hoping something sticks." David hesitated. "Maggie, there's something else. They've been asking questions about Frank's life insurance, specifically about the beneficiaries. Burke implied there may be irregularities in how the funds were distributed. I'm digging into it." A chill rippled through me. "What do you mean, irregularities?" "I'm not sure yet," David said cautiously, "but it sounded like Brian might know something you don't." After we hung up, I sat frozen in my chair, staring out at the park as a creeping unease settled in my stomach like a stone. Frank had always handled the insurance and investments. I'd trusted him completely, signing whatever papers he'd handed me without question. Had Brian found something I'd missed? That afternoon, I drove to Emma's school. I parked across the street, watching as kids poured out of the building. Then I spotted her, small and slouched, her backpack dragging low. Her usual spark dimmed. My chest tightened. When she finally reached the playground, I stepped out of the car and called her name. Her head snapped up, and her whole face lit up like Christmas morning. She dropped her bag and ran straight to me, nearly knocking me over with the force of her hug. "Grandma, I missed you so much. Why did you leave?" My heart broke a little. I had to, sweetheart, I said softly. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and other grown-ups have to protect themselves. Are you coming home? I can't, Emma, but maybe you could visit me sometime. My new apartment even has a pool. Her eyes lit up. Really? Really. Ask your parents if you can come see me this weekend. I hugged her tight, burying my face in her hair. I love you, baby girl. Don't ever forget that. As I drove away, I spotted Jessica's car pulling into the school parking lot. A minute later, my phone lit up with her name. She'd clearly seen me with Emma. I ignored the call. Friday morning came, and with it, the psychological evaluation. I arrived at Dr. Patricia Coleman's office early, dressed in my sharpest navy suit and pearl earrings, projecting calm confidence, the picture of a capable, well-groomed woman in her golden years. Dr. Coleman was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-40s, with kind eyes behind thin, wire-rimmed glasses. "This is Sullivan," she said warmly. "This evaluation was requested by your son's attorney, but I work independently. My job is to assess your mental capacity, not take sides." "I appreciate that, Dr. Coleman." For 2 hours, she tested my memory, problem-solving, and reasoning skills, asking about my financial choices. I answered every question honestly, walking her through my decisions step by step. "You seem to have excellent recall and sharp analytical thinking," she observed, making a note. "Tell me about your relationship with your son and daughter-in-law." I chose my words carefully. "They're struggling financially. I think they saw me as a solution to their problems, rather than as a person with my own needs and rights." "Do you worry that some might see your actions as extreme?" she asked gently. I met her gaze without hesitation. "Dr. Coleman, if someone tried to steal your life savings and have you locked away, what would you consider an appropriate response?" She smiled faintly and jotted something down. Point taken. That evening, David called with an update. "The evaluation went well," he reported. "She's recommending no conservatorship. But Maggie, we have a problem." A chill ran through me. "What is it?" I found out what Burke was hinting at. My stomach dropped. "Tell me." Frank had a second life insurance policy, a big one. $2 million, purchased 5 years before he died. And you weren't the only beneficiary. The room tilted around me. "Who else?" "Someone named Linda Morrison. Does that ring a bell?" The name hit me like a punch. Linda Morrison, Frank's secretary, the beautiful blonde who always laughed a little too hard at his jokes at company picnics. "She got half the payout," David continued gently. $1 million. The insurance company issued 2 checks, one to her, one to you. $1 million each. I clutched the phone tighter. "But I only received $500,000 from his life insurance." "That's exactly what Burke's interested in. If Linda got her full share, then where's your missing $500,000? The realization hit me like ice water. Brian had handled every detail of the insurance paperwork after Frank's funeral. He'd told me the policy was only worth $500,000 after taxes and fees. I'd been too broken, too trusting to question him. "My son stole $500,000 from me," I whispered. "It appears so," David confirmed grimly. "And if he's been sitting on this information while trying to have you declared incompetent, it establishes a pattern of financial exploitation going back years." I closed my eyes, waves of betrayal crashing over me. Frank had deceived me, both emotionally and financially. And Brian? My own son had been stealing from me long before he tried to put me away. The 2 men I trusted most in this world had both betrayed me. But instead of despair, I felt something else building. Something sharp, cold, and unbreakable. Rage. Pure crystalline rage. "David," I said in a voice I barely recognized, "I want to destroy him." I spent the entire weekend plotting my next steps. If Brian thought he could manipulate me with secrets about Frank's affair, he was about to discover that 2 could play that game. Monday morning, I dialed Linda Morrison's number. According to a quick search, she was now Linda Morrison Hayes, living in suburban Atlanta with her orthodontist husband and 2 teenage daughters. The phone rang 4 times before a woman finally answered. "Hello, Linda. This is Margaret Sullivan, Frank's wife." The pause on the other end was so long, I thought she might hang up. Finally, a shaky voice said, "Oh my God, Margaret. I wasn't expecting. How did you get this number?" I'm very resourceful when I need to be. My tone was calm, almost pleasant. "I think we need to talk about Frank's insurance policy." I don't know what you mean," she said hesitantly. "Linda," I replied, my voice still warm but with an edge. "I know about the $2 million policy. I know you received half of it. What I'd like to know is what you know about my half." Another heavy silence. Your son told me you'd received your portion." "My son told you," I repeated slowly. "When exactly did you speak to my son?" "He called me after Frank's funeral to discuss arrangements and the insurance situation." My pulse quickened. "And what did he tell you about this situation?" "He said you were overwhelmed with grief and that he was managing your finances temporarily. He claimed the insurance company had made a mistake and sent 2 checks instead of 1. He told me to cash mine and not worry about it." The audacity left me momentarily speechless. Not only had Brian stolen from me, but he'd managed to rope Frank's mistress into covering his tracks. "Linda, that check you cashed? It was meant to be split between us. Frank left us each $500,000, not $1 million each." That's not what Brian said," she stammered. "He even showed me paperwork. Forged paperwork, I'm willing to bet." I let the truth sink in. "Linda, it looks like we've both been played by my son. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" Tuesday morning, I was sitting in the lobby of Brian's office building when he walked in. The look on his face when he saw me, ashen, tight-lipped, was worth every second of this plan. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he asked, glancing nervously at his coworkers. "Hello, Brian," I said with a bright smile. "Lovely morning, isn't it?" I rose, smoothing my skirt. "I thought we could have lunch together. There's so much to catch up on." "I'm really busy today," he muttered. "Oh, I insist," I replied sweetly. "I already made a reservation at Giovanni's. You remember Giovanni's, don't you? Where you took me to celebrate your promotion last year?" His jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fine, but I can't stay long." Giovanni's was bustling with the usual lunch crowd, the perfect camouflage for what was about to unfold. We ordered, made small talk about Emma, and I waited patiently until his shoulders relaxed, his guard slipping. Then I struck. "I had the most fascinating conversation with Linda Morrison yesterday," I said, my voice calm, almost casual. Brian's fork slipped from his hand and clattered against his plate. The color drained from his face, shifting through shades of red and gray until it settled on a sickly pale. I don't know what she told you," he managed, his voice shaking. "She told me you convinced her the insurance company made a mistake, that she deserved a full $1 million instead of the $500,000 Frank left her." I sipped my iced tea leisurely, savoring every second. Imagine my surprise when I realized you'd stolen $500,000 from me to cover up your father's affair. "I was protecting you," Brian hissed, then quickly lowered his voice when nearby diners turned to look. "You were devastated when Dad died. Knowing about Linda would have crushed you. So instead," I said coldly, "you pocketed my money and pretended it was for my own good." "It wasn't like that," he said desperately. "I used it to pay off our mortgage. To secure Emma's future. You would have just saved it." I let out a sharp laugh that turned heads. "You stole $500,000 from your grieving mother and convinced yourself you were some kind of hero. The arrogance is breathtaking." "Mom, please," he whispered, leaning closer. "Let me explain everything." I raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead." "Dad left Linda that money because," Brian swallowed hard, Because she was pregnant. The world tilted. My grip on the iced tea glass tightened. What? Linda was pregnant with Dad's baby, he said softly. She lost it in the 4th month, but Dad had already changed his beneficiary to provide for the child. When she miscarried, he was going to change it back, but then he had the heart attack. I stared at him, the weight of this new betrayal pressing down like a physical force. Frank hadn't just had an affair. He'd gotten his mistress pregnant. And Brian had known all along. How long have you known? I asked, my voice calm but razor sharp. Linda called me right after the funeral, he admitted, unable to meet my eyes. She was devastated, grieving Dad, dealing with the miscarriage. She showed me the medical records, the insurance paperwork, everything. And instead of telling me the truth, you decided to steal from both of us, I said coldly. I convinced her she deserved the full $1 million after what she'd been through, he argued, desperation creeping into his voice. And I used your share to pay off our debts so you wouldn't have to worry about us struggling financially while you were grieving. The twisted logic was almost impressive. He'd convinced himself that robbing his mother was an act of mercy. Brian's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced down, and his face drained of color. It's Jessica, he said quietly. She says David Morrison is at the house with papers. I smiled, slow and deliberate. Oh, that'll be the criminal fraud charges. I filed them this morning. Criminal charges? His voice cracked. Insurance fraud, elder abuse, theft by deception. I signaled the waiter for the check. David was quite thorough. You see, Brian, when you forge documents and lie to insurance companies about beneficiaries, that's a felony. When you steal from your elderly mother, that's elder abuse. And when you do it all while planning to have her declared incompetent, I leaned forward, lowering my voice. That shows premeditation. His hands trembled. Mom, please, think about Emma. If I go to jail, you should have thought about Emma. I cut him off sharply. Before you chose this path. I stood, placing cash for my lunch on the table. But don't worry about her. She'll be well cared for. In fact, I added with a pointed smile, she'll inherit far more than you ever will. What do you mean? He croaked. I bent close to his ear. Linda's giving me back the money that was rightfully mine. All of it. Turns out she's not as comfortable with theft as you are. His face crumpled. You can't do this to me. I'm your son. You're right. You are my son. And that, I said, straightening up, is what makes this so much worse. I left him sitting there in stunned silence, walked out into the warm sunlight, and climbed into my car, my hands steady on the wheel. There was just one more stop to make. The next morning, I sat in my apartment, watching the news broadcast. Local insurance agent charged with elder abuse and fraud, the anchor reported. Brian Sullivan is accused of stealing more than $500,000 from his mother's insurance settlement while attempting to have her declared mentally incompetent. My phone had been ringing all morning, calls from reporters, concerned neighbors, and old friends who had seen the story. I ignored every single one, except for a name that made me pause. Grandma, came Emma's small, trembling voice. Mommy's crying and won't tell me why Daddy isn't coming home. My heart shattered for this innocent child, caught in the crossfire of adult betrayal. I'll be right there, sweetheart. I found her at a friend's house, where Jessica had left her before going to see Brian in jail. Emma looked so small, clutching her stuffed rabbit, eyes wide with fear and confusion. Are you in trouble too, Grandma? She whispered. I knelt and took her little hands in mine. No, baby, I'm not in trouble. Sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices, and they have to face the consequences. Is Daddy a bad person? She asked softly. Your daddy isn't bad, Emma, but he made bad choices, and now he has to make them right. For hours, I gently explained things in terms a child could understand, about honesty, kindness, and taking responsibility, about how stealing is wrong, no matter the excuse, about how loving someone doesn't mean protecting them from consequences. "Are you still mad at Daddy?" she asked. I thought for a moment. I'm disappointed in him, and I'm sad that he hurt me, but I will always love him because he gave me you. That evening, Jessica came to pick her up. She looked exhausted, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "The lawyers say he might get 5 years if he's convicted," she whispered. "That's up to the judge now. A year ago, I would have let her words sink in, would have carried that guilt like a stone. Jessica," I said softly but firmly, "I forgave Brian the moment I filed those charges. Forgiveness doesn't mean erasing consequences. It means I won't let his actions poison the rest of my life." 3 months later, Brian pled guilty to avoid a trial. He was sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security prison, followed by 5 years of probation. The judge ordered full restitution, $700,000, plus interest and legal fees. Jessica was forced to sell their house and downsize to a modest apartment. She found a job at a dental office and began supporting herself and Emma. Life wasn't easy for her, but I watched her grow stronger, finally learning to stand on her own. Emma, sweet Emma, visited me every weekend. We baked cookies, swam in my apartment pool, and worked on her school projects together. She was resilient, as children often are, and she was learning powerful lessons about honesty, accountability, and love, the kind of love that doesn't excuse harm. As for me, I reclaimed my life. I enrolled in art classes at the local community college, joined a book club, and began volunteering at an animal shelter. At 67, I was finally living life on my terms, not as a background character in someone else's story. Frank's betrayal still haunted me in quiet moments, but I had learned something invaluable. Being hurt doesn't make you weak, and being kind doesn't make you a fool. The day Brian was released from prison, he called me. "Mom," his voice cracked through the receiver. "It's me. I know I don't deserve it, but could we try to start over?" I stood at my window, looking out at the park where children played and couples strolled hand in hand. The world was wide open, full of possibilities I had almost allowed to slip away. "Yes," I said finally, "but this time we do it on my terms." Some stories end with reconciliation. Others end with justice. Mine ended with both, and a brand new beginning. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.